This is not science. This is stupid. The earth to be billions of years old so that you can reject the Bible. Maybe that's your motive. I don't know.
No, I believe welcome to NT Podcast, the best channel in the Balkans for discussions on science and religion. Today we are joined by Hovind, a well-known advocate of creationism and one of the most controversial voices on the internet. So, dear audience, if you enjoy our content, please make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, like, consider supporting us through donations so we can continue bringing top-tier conversations with experts from around the world. So, Mr. Hovind, welcome. How are you?
Well, thank you. Doing great. Good to have you. We're on all kinds of channels here. We're in Lenox, Alabama, straight north of Pensacola. We're on, Rumble and all these channels. You can get us. I have our own app, Hovind TV. So tell your folks to get a hold of us if they got any questions. We believe the Bible is true, and evolution is the dumbest and most dangerous religion in the world.
Oh,
you said I'm the most controversial man on the internet. No. See, I'm right. They're wrong. That's all.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So our today's topic is radiometric dating. I believe this method works quite well, while my guest does not. So we'll see if he can convince me by the end of this episode. I'll do my best to stay open-minded. So, Mr. Hovind, can you explain the main objections to the radiometric method? Why don't you trust it?
Well, no, the carbon dating works great. I'll just give you a quick summary here. Carbon and nitrogen are right next to each other on the periodic table. And carbon is atomic weight of 12, and nitrogen is 14. Radiation from the sun comes down and strikes the atmosphere, and it changes some of the nitrogen 14 into carbon 14. And it is what they call radioactive, which means if you put a Geiger counter next to it, you'll hear a click, click, click as it's falling apart. It's breaking down. Radioactive decay, they call that. The atmosphere is about 300 miles thick right now. Most of it's within 10 miles. I think nobody argues about this. These are from earth science books. Radiation from the sun, strikes the atmosphere, and produces radioactive carbon-14. It combines with oxygen to make radioactive carbon-14, carbon dioxide, okay? Plants breathe in the CO2. That's what they breathe. That's what they live off of. Earth's atmosphere contains mostly nitrogen, 21% oxygen, a very small amount of carbon dioxide, and that's what the plants have to live off of. Some of these people are worried about, these factories producing CO2, and that's bad. All the plants around those factories grow faster. They absorb the CO2 right away. They love it. So it's not a global warming problem from CO2. There couldn't be. The plants would simply grow faster to absorb it. But a very, very, very tiny amount of the carbon dioxide is radioactive carbon dioxide. Most carbon dioxide is just regular carbon and oxygen. But 0.0000765% is radioactive carbon-14. It combines with the other C4 carbon dioxide, and the wind mixes them all together. Okay. A very, very, very tiny amount of the air we're breathing is carbon dioxide. We breathe in and use the oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, and the plants love it, okay? Percentage of carbon-14, let's see, 0.000, it's a very, very tiny amount. Back in the 1950s, Willard Libby at the University of Chicago basically invented the carbon-14 method of dating things. He said, wow, the plants are breathing in carbon dioxide. A small part of that is radioactive. And we know that means it's breaking down, it's falling apart. So they tested how long does it take for half of it to break apart and fall, to decay. And they came up with a number of 5,730 years. I think that's probably correct. So if I gave you a pile of carbon-14 radioactive, half of it would decay back to nitrogen in 5,730 years. Sounds real good. If you wait another 5,730 years, another half of the half would break down. So it'd be 1/4. Willard Libby invented this method of dating things, okay? Radioactive carbon-14, there's about 21 pounds of nitrogen is changed into carbon-14 over the whole world every year. 21 pounds scattered over the whole world, that's a real tiny, tiny, tiny amount, okay? Carbon-14, we can skip some of this here, but carbon-14 cycle, I can go all day if you'd like, but The rate of carbon-14 can be affected by the sun. The sunlight and the stars, there can be a nova or a supernova. There can be a radio burst from our sun, like sunspot cycle. That would change the rate that carbon-14 is forming. Well, if the formation rate of carbon-14 is flexible, well, then you can't date anything with carbon-14. You don't know that the rate has always been the same. That's the rate of its formation. You also don't know that the rate of its decay has always been the same. That can be affected by several things. Earth's magnetic field has an effect on carbon-14 formation. And if the magnetic field is waning, getting stronger and weaker and stronger and weaker, and we know that it does that, how can you possibly carbon-14 date something? Because you don't know that the formation rate has been the same, nor the decay rate has been the same. Cosmic rays strike our atmosphere, and they convert some of the nitrogen into radioactive carbon-14. Most of them get an oxygen molecule and become CO2, radioactive CO2. The plants absorb this and make it part of their tissue. It goes into their leaf or stem or fruit or root or whatever. Animals come along and eat the plants. Now it gets into the animals. I bet during your lifetime you've either eaten plants or you've eaten animals that have eaten plants. That's all there is. That's our whole diet, right? So I'd be willing to bet you have some carbon-14 radioactive in you. If we put a Geiger counter next to you, you would probably make it go click, click, click. And we could measure how many clicks per minute we get off of you or me or anybody else. Some of the carbon dioxide has radioactive carbon. It's unstable. It does not like being C14, and it immediately starts decaying back into nitrogen, a gas which escapes. So based on many tests, half of it will break down in 5,730 years. I agree, no argument out of me. That is the current half-life of C14. All right, no argument.
Sorry, can I jump, please,
Sure.
with question? Because if we find any amount that is less than 50% of C14, it seems like it's older than 6,000 years. Would you agree?
I understand. That's because we're using today's standard. Has the Earth always had that standard, 0.0000765? I'll show you my theory on that. But when they test old trees and things like that, like they found somebody's sandals from an ice age, got frozen in ice, Iceman, okay? They carbon dated his sample. They found it 5,300 years old. So the Iceman. His shoes made of leather, grass, and twine. What are the limitations of carbon-14 dating? It works best on things that are less than 60,000 years of age. I agree, if it works at all. Samples can easily be contaminated. So to provide accurate dates, they must be clean and well preserved. Dirt and other material must be washed off with water, but chemical treatments and cleaning products are also needed. Because there are so few atoms to count, even a little extra carbon from a contamination will throw off the results significantly. A million-year-old sample contaminated by a tiny amount of carbon could yield an age of 40,000. This is from University of Chicago.edu. You can get that, okay? Be a tree ring detective. Discover your world. There's lots on the internet about carbon-14. I think, though, they're missing by far the major obvious problems, and I'll share that with you here. Carbon-14, definition from Britannica, from Chem Team. What is carbon dating? University of Chicago. I got tons of articles on this. How does it work? Okay. Fossils are actually dated by the layer they're found in. About 200 years ago, they started teaching kids that the layers of the Earth are different ages. This is one of the dumbest things they ever taught in school. How can the top layer of Earth be younger? Where did it come from? Are these layers coming from outer space? There is no such thing as a geologic column. No such thing. There's no such thing as a Jurassic age. All the layers of the Earth are the same age. Whether it's 6,000 or 6 trillion, they're all the same age. The dirt is not coming from outer space. They say, well, it got moved from here to here. Well, that doesn't change the age. If I shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card younger now? No. See, radiometric dating would not even be possible if it weren't for the geologic column. And there's where one of the many problems comes in. They date the fossils by the layer they're found in. Then they may carbon date it, and if it doesn't match the geologic date, they throw the carbon date out. They might have to test a sample 5 or 6 times to get the number they want. Well, then why are you wasting your time doing it at all? You already know what you want. This guy said, I can think of no cases of radioactive decay being used to date fossils. From New Scientist magazine. So here's the way it works. Carbon and nitrogen right next to each other. A Geiger counter can detect radioactive elements like uranium, potassium, carbon-14. There are quite a few radioactive elements. They're falling apart. It's being formed in the atmosphere by the sun. It breaks down about half of it every 5,730 years. Sounds great. During photosynthesis, the plants breathe in CO2 and make it part of their body. Animals come along and eat the plants and make it part of their body. So you've probably eaten plants or animals in your lifetime. If you have C14 in your body right now, and you could be carbon dated right now. It's assumed that the percentage of C14 in the air is the same in all living plants and animals. That is simply not provable. Okay? You cannot possibly know such a thing. Plants breathe in CO2. It's assumed that the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 in the atmosphere would be the same found in living plants and animals. Probably reasonable. If the atmosphere has 0.0000765%, probably the animals and plants alive today have the same amount. When the animal dies, it stops taking in any more. Sounds good. I believe that's true. Okay? You probably quit eating when you die. Stops eating and breathing. So they're comparing the amount of C14 in the object with the amount currently in the atmosphere to estimate how long it's been dead. If the sample you're testing only has half as much as the air today does, you would say it's been dead for 1 half-life. If it has 1/4 as much, you would say it's been dead for 2 half-lives, 10,000 years. And the people jump on that and say, see, that proves the Bible wrong. Oh, wildly wrong on that, okay? They're testing it against today's standard, 0.0000765%. Now it's going to decay. Half of it will disappear in 5,700 years. It can't get any more since it's dead. It's not breathing or eating. So if you get a radiometric, a Geiger counter, and it tells you there's 0.0000765, you'd say it's freshly killed. It's 0 years old. If you only get half of that, it's 5,700 years old. 1/4 of that is 11,000, and 1/8 is now 17,000. So it goes from a half to a fourth to an eighth to a 16th. Keep in mind, radioactive decay is totally random. All of it could decay in 1 second. This is just a random shuffling of numbers. You think it probably takes 5,700 years, when theoretically, all of it could decay in 1 second. It's a decay process. Okay, here's a calibration curve they use. If you're getting 16 clicks on your Geiger counter, it's probably still alive or freshly killed. If you're only getting 8 clicks, it's been dead for 1 half-life. 4 clicks, 2 half-lives, 2 clicks, 3 half-lives, etc. With their short half-life, no carbon-14 atoms should exist in anything more than 250,000 years old, because there'd be nothing left. Yet it has proven impossible to find any source of carbon below the Ice Age strata that does not contain significant amounts of C14, even though they're supposed to be millions or billions of years old. They can't figure out what's going on here. This is a good article from ICR.org. The world's best laboratory tested it, said they can't find any samples that don't have C14. Well, then they're not millions of years old, because it should all be gone.
Sorry, can I ask a question? Because
Sure.
heard from some geologists that they say that there are fossils that don't have any amount of C14. What do you think about that?
I'd like to see the documentation of that, but if that's true, that still is not a problem. I'll show you. Here's the assumptions that this is all based on, wild assumptions. If I said to you, I want you to fill this barrel with water, I give you a hose to fill the barrel, but on the other side, I've drilled a bunch of holes. As the water fills up, it starts leaking out a hole. Pretty soon it's leaking out 2 holes, then leaking out 3 holes. At some point in here, you're going to reach a stage called equilibrium. You cannot fill the barrel because it's leaking as fast as you're putting it in. This is kind of like your checkbook, you know. You keep putting it in, it keeps leaking out, right? So they say the atmosphere, the sun is creating carbon-14. That is filling the barrel. The decay rate is emptying the barrel. The sun is adding C14, and it's leaking out through decay at the same time. How long would it take the Earth to reach equilibrium? Earth's atmosphere, C14 equilibrium. This article, I got the reference on here somewhere. University of Wisconsin. Let's see. let's see, carbon dating. Have we reached equilibrium? They say we should reach equilibrium in 30,000 years. If you took a brand new planet Earth, put a layer of air around it, atmosphere, got it going around the sun, 93 million miles away. In 30,000 years, the formation rate and the decay rate would equalize. That would be the equilibrium. They said, well, we know the Earth is millions of years old. That's mistake number one. So we can ignore this equilibrium problem. Ugh, mistake number two. It would take 30,000 years for the Earth's atmosphere to reach equilibrium. I agree. That sounds reasonable. Then they say that we know the Earth is millions of years old. No, you don't know any such thing. They say we can ignore the equilibrium problem. Oh, no, you can't. We have still not reached equilibrium. Carbon-14 is still forming faster than it's decaying. Whoa, 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 that creates a problem. That means it's less than 30,000 years old, and you can't carbon date anything because you don't know how much was in it when it died. You're assuming when it died, it had the same amount we have today. That's a false assumption. Let's see, fluctuations in the rate of C14 production mean that at times the production rate will exceed the decay rate. Other times the decay rate will be larger. They've known this for 40 years. The amount of C14 in the atmosphere has been the same. No, you don't know anything. You can't know that. It's not true. So therefore, you can't carbon date anything. That's been my point all along. Let's see. If you walked into a room and found a candle burning on a table, and I said, hey, when was it lit? How long has this thing been burning? This is, you dig up a sample, you carbon date it. How long has it been decaying? In other words, how long has it been dead? Well, let's do some empirical science on the candle. Let's measure how tall it is. We find out the candle, after careful measurements, is 7 inches tall. Okay? How long has it been burning? That won't tell me. Let's do some more science. Let's measure how fast it's burning. We get Olympic stopwatches and we measure it and find out it's burning 1 inch an hour. Nobody argues it is 7 inches tall, it's burning 1 inch an hour. Can you tell me when it was lit? No. You'd have to make some assumptions, like how tall was it when it started? We don't know. Has it always burned at the same rate? We don't know. You cannot tell me when that thing was lit, and you cannot tell me when that fossil died or when that fossil lived by the carbon-14 in it. You don't know the decay rate's been the same. If you find a fossil in the dirt, and we've got a whole museum here full of fossils, come see them, Lenox, Alabama, Dinosaur Adventureland. The amount of carbon-14 can be measured, no question, real precisely. And the rate of decay can be determined. I don't argue, I agree. How much was in it when it died? You cannot possibly know that. Has it always decayed at the same rate? We know it does not because of the solar sunspot cycle and the stars and the supernovas. There's lots of things that affect the rate of decay. You cannot carbon date anything. It doesn't work. What happened here? Okay. I believe strongly the Bible teaches that there used to be a crystal canopy a few inches thick of ice above the atmosphere. The earth was surrounded by a crystalline sphere, like a big greenhouse. The Jews have always taught that there was a canopy over the air about 2 or 3 fingers thick. In the Bible, it said, God said there's going to be water above the place where the birds fly. Now that's gone now. If there was a 2 or 3 inch thick layer of ice above the atmosphere, it could have been held up by the Earth's magnetic field, because super cold ice is magnetic. It could have been held up by air pressure, like a big inflatable building. But that ice would block UV light, which means they had very little carbon-14, if any. Animals living before the flood.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Because Jonathan Sarfati and other creationists would say that if we have a layer of water like that, or ice, or anything, we would be boiled down, or I don't know. So what do you think about those comments?
I think they're wrong. I'll talk to them about it and tell them to give me a call. The Bible says there was water above the firmament. The Bible says the birds fly in the firmament. It's all in the first 2 chapters. So I think, and the Jews have always taught there was a crystal canopy, 2 or 3 fingers thick, above the air. I think that's the only way to explain the giant dinosaurs, which have small nostrils. How can you get an 80-foot dinosaur with nostrils the same size as a horse? They had to have increased air pressure. A crystal canopy squeezing the air down into maybe 10 miles would probably double the air pressure on the surface. If you've ever climbed a tall mountain, you know you can hardly breathe up there because the air's too thin. Pilots in airplanes, if they get up high enough, they have to bring oxygen with them. If you climb Mount Everest, you have to have oxygen. It's only 5 miles high. I climbed Mount Rainier in Washington. It was hard to breathe up there. The air is too thin. By compressing the air, it makes it easier for animals to grow much bigger. And for animals that fly, they can fly easier because the air is thicker. Birds are limited how high they can fly based on the air gets thinner. They can't flap fast enough. We find fossil birds with fossil dragonflies with 50-inch wingspan. They could not fly today. We find fossil dinosaurs with real small nostrils and small lungs. But we find their bones. They did live and they did get that big, but they could not breathe in today's world. They couldn't survive. So I think the scientific evidence is overwhelming. The Earth, plus when they find amber, I got amber here somewhere. When you get a piece of amber, which is petrified tree sap, there's air bubbles in there. Maybe you saw the movie Jurassic Park where they got the mosquito blood out, you know. The air bubbles in the amber are 35% oxygen. The air we are breathing right now is 21% oxygen. I think the Earth before the flood came had 35% oxygen and double the pressure. Everything would grow bigger, live much longer, and you could run for hundreds of miles without getting tired. We find fossils of just about every kind of animal in the world that are huge compared to today's fossils. Today, beavers get about 3 feet long. They find fossil beavers 8 feet long. Today, ducks, get about this big, a duck. They find fossil ducks that are bigger than a horse. Almost every animal today has a fossil counterpart that is much bigger than the ones today. Reptiles never stop growing. Never. So the reptiles before the flood came in the days of Noah, when that canopy was protecting the world, would get to be 40, 50, 60 feet long. That's the age of dinosaurs. They lived with Adam and Eve. So that canopy, when it broke at the flood, would allow the air to expand out to current 50 or 60 miles. That would absorb the heat from the rain coming down, the latent heat of condensation. And that now nobody lives to be 900. But if you read your Bible, the people used to live to be 900. If you look at ancient legends from China or India or Russia, they have stories of the golden age. Why do all these countries, non-Christian countries, say, wow, man used to live to be 1,000? Why would they have a crazy legend like that? It's true, they used to live to be 900. So this canopy of ice overhead would also block out UV light, which means almost no carbon-14 is forming. So the animals that lived before the flood probably had maybe nothing, no C14 in their body. We dig up the animal and try to carbon date it by today's standard, and we say, wow, there's nothing left. It must be millions of years old. No, it must have lived in a world that didn't have any C14. They're unable to even think outside the box they've been locked into by their education system. I think the world was different before the flood. They lived to be 900 years old. The Bible tells us in the last days.
Sorry, finish, please.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So can I practically ask you about when you have, for example, manuscript of New Testament, for example, P46. It's dated about 3rd or 2nd century. Mm-hmm. So when someone say, okay, look, the C14 shows that this is exactly from that year, would you believe that? Or
I think any of those, like a manuscript made out of leather or something like that, they're trying to carbon date it, you got the same problem. You don't know how much was in it. We know the C14 in the atmosphere is still increasing. So we know it's less than 30,000 years old. The whole atmosphere is. So I think I'd be very cautious about carbon dating anything. There's too many assumptions. In a court of law, an honest court of law, none of the carbon dates would hold up to scrutiny. None of them.
But when we have other techniques and methods like
right.
dendrochronology, we can calibrate and get same results for some things. What do you think then?
Well, if anybody thinks the rings of a tree are annual rings, they are stupid. They are seasonal. It's not summer, winter, summer, winter. Trees can get 2 or 3 rings a year. This has been known for a long time. The oldest tree is in California. The Methuselah tree has 4,800 rings, 4,350 rings. So the maximum would be 4,350 years, which is the time of Noah's flood. Probably much less than that because
older tree in about 50 years ago that was dated about 5,000 years. What do you think
Okay.
about that?
Well, no, listen to me. It has 5,000 rings. That does not mean it's 5,000 years old. If they can produce 2 or 3 rings in 1 year, you could have a nice wet spring and lots of sunshine, and the tree gets a nice big fat ring. Then you have a hot, dry summer. It gets a hard ring. Then you get a nice fall, lots of rain, lots of sunshine. It makes another soft ring. You can have 2 or 3 rings a year. They're called false rings, and you can't tell the difference. So it has 5,000 rings. That does not mean it's 5,000 years old.
Yes, but I think that experts would say that it is more frequently that trees wouldn't show any ring per year if the climate is cold and weather is sharp.
Well, no, the temperature affects it, and the rainfall and the amount of sunlight. You can have nice weather and have a different amount of sunlight, and it changes to the type of ring it produces, the xylem and the phloem. Okay, so I think there's no scientific evidence to show that the Bible is wrong about there being a flood 4,400 years ago that destroyed the whole world. Why aren't there trees that are 50,000 or 500,000 years old? Getting into the age of the Earth is another topic, but I think as far as carbon dating, it does not work on anything. You have too many assumptions built in. You don't know how much was in it when it died.
Did I explain correctly? Because, sorry for my bad English. I wanted to say that it is more common that you have less rings or even 0 per year if weather is cold. It is more frequent than to have more rings per year, they say at least.
Well, many things affect tree ring. I taught biology 15 years. 2 trees on the opposite sides of a mountain. One side gets the wind going up this way, so there's nice warm wind. They grow faster. Then it goes over the mountain, comes down. Now it's cold. These trees grow slower. You can have trees on the opposite side of the same mountain getting different tree ring patterns. The prevailing wind pattern affects that. The amount of rainfall. You have the leeward side and the windward side. As the air blows up a mountain, it drops the rain. On the other side, it comes down. It's expanding. It absorbs the moisture. So you might have a dry mountain on one side. They call it the rain shadow. So there are many, many things that affect tree ring production. The soil, the sunlight, the mountains can affect how the clouds form on one side and not the other. Dendrochronology is a very complex science and lots of variables involved. But even then, the oldest tree at 5,000, I don't think it is. I think that's 5,000 rings, but not 5,000 years. But still, a tree could have survived the flood. Noah was in the ark for a year. We don't know that the world was flooded for a year. Some parts might have only been underwater for 2 weeks, long enough to kill everybody. So trees can survive floods. They do it all the time. Big flood comes in, trees, water goes down 2 weeks later, the trees are fine. So I don't think you could prove the tree rings, prove the Bible is wrong, because again, your 5,000 rings is the most you have, and there's not annual rings. And too many things affect that.
Okay, can we just go back about geological column? You said that upper layers are not necessarily the youngest. Can you say why you think that? Because if you have new sediments, it will be in upper layer, not down. So can you explain more?
That's not correct. There's a video you should watch called Experiments in Stratification. The layers form sideways. As the moon is pulling the tide up, the water has to be rushing sideways to fill the tidal bump. Every 6 hours, 12.5 minutes. The tide comes up, then it goes back down, up, down. 6 hours, 12.5 minutes is the world average. The water coming sideways can make 8 or 10 or 15 layers at the same time. The layers form horizontally, not vertically. Watch the video, Experiments in Stratification, done by University of Colorado. They show it happening. They have a flume with glass sides, and the water's flowing, and they pour different sediments in, and they form many layers at the same time. Well, if the layers are forming downstream, then you could have a fossil on top that's older than one on the bottom. The layers are not, they're not. If the layers are truly different ages, like they say, where are they coming from? There is no geologic column. Are layers coming from outer space? Where did the Holocene dirt come from? They tell the kids in school, here we go, the geologic column does not exist. I'll get a picture of it. They say the one on top, the Holocene, is 10,000 years old. And the Cambrian at the bottom is 542 million years old, half a billion. Well, where was all the Holocene dirt sitting around for millions of years? Are they being added from space? I've done 386 debates with atheists. They never answer the simple question. How can that dirt be younger? Where did it come from? Is the Earth being dipped in caramel every few years and getting a new layer added? No. It's the same dirt being shuffled around. You can show easily that the geologic column does not exist. I'll show you here. All over the world, thousands and thousands of trees are found standing up, petrified, connecting all the layers. How long does a dead tree stand around in Serbia before it falls over? Maybe 1 or 2 years, right? How do you explain petrified trees running through all the layers? They're claiming the layers are different ages. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. And science is supposed to be always checking to make sure what we're teaching is right. Thousands of times through history, they've taught things that later found out, wow, that's not true. Let's change that. Our first president, George Washington, was killed by his own doctors because they were taught, if you're sick, your blood has gone bad. Take out your blood and you'll get better. They called it the doctrine of humors. They bled George, I think, 3 times, and he finally died. They were very sincere, very smart men who believed something that was wrong. The geologic column does not exist anywhere in the world. Petrified trees in the standing position are found all over the place. We've got some logs here in our museum that came from a coal mine up in Birmingham, Alabama. They still have the bark on them. And they were found standing up in a coal mine running through 2 seams of coal. I'll show you a picture of it here.
But can we explain that with theory of ecological zonations? Because material can be indeed old, and maybe some catastrophe as a flood can bury that tree or anything. So what do you think about that theory?
Oh, I think probably all the coal in the world was formed because of the flood of Noah, knocking all the trees down. Trees would tend to be buried in huge layers. I think if we look at today's world, got a map here, below. The world today is 70% underwater. Still, 70% is still underwater. That's from the flood, okay? The world today is only 3% habitable. 70% underwater, 10% ice caps, 10% deserts, mountain ranges. They say about 3% of the world is habitable. I won't argue that number. I think it's probably correct. The Bible says in Isaiah 45, God formed it to be inhabited. So I think before the flood came, the world was totally habitable. You could live at the North Pole, South Pole, anywhere, even temperature everywhere, because that crystal canopy would even out the temperature, a big greenhouse. Then when the flood came, it destroyed everything. And if the world was mostly land, there'd be a lot more trees. There is more coal in the ground right now than you could possibly make. I debated one atheist, Jeannie Scott, at University in Berkeley, California. She said, if you took all the trees in the world and pressed them down and made coal, you could not make all the coal in the ground. I said, that's correct. She said, don't you see, that proves it takes millions of years. No, Jeannie, that proves the earth had a lot more trees when the flood came. A lot more trees. There's a coal mine in Wyoming, 300 feet thick, solid coal. That's a lot of coal. This coal mine up in Birmingham, there's the guy, you can talk to him right here. He's a supervisor up there. Call him up. He said, yeah, we find petrified trees all the time, standing up, running right through 2 different seams of coal. I'll show you where he sent me some pictures here. You have the Mary Lee Formation and the Blue Creek. He said, I can prove very simply that by tree A and tree H, both those seams of coal had to form very quickly. The flood, with the tide going up, down, rushing in and out, the sideways movement made all the layers to the earth. Here's a petrified tree in Tennessee running through a seam of coal. The top of this very same tree is in a different seam of coal. There is no good explanation from the atheist about this. It's much simpler to say those layers formed within a year of each other. Petrified trees. Joggins, Nova Scotia has hundreds and hundreds of petrified trees standing up, running through all the layers. So I'm sorry, there is no...
It don't need to be explained by newly formatted material, because Earth can be old as a gap theory, passive gap theory, and then few thousand years ago, God could create the world and flood can destroy all this, and the matter would be really old, but that tree is young, let's say.
Oh, I wrote a booklet about the gap theory. It's not true at all, but even then, that doesn't solve the problem. The evolutionists want so badly to get rid of God and to prove the Bible is wrong. They want to find something wrong with this book because they don't like what it says. They say, if we can find one mistake someplace, maybe we can ignore it. This book says don't commit adultery. Well, they want to commit adultery, so they don't like the book. Don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat.
What do you mean by they?
What do I mean by what?
You said they want...
a day?
Yeah.
Okay. The Bible says on day 3.
No, sorry. You said that they would
Spell
like...
it. I don't understand.
You said they don't like the rules.
Oh, they. Okay. Who's they? T-H-E-Y.
Yeah.
Well, many people, I've had 386 debates with atheists. I can tell you the atheists don't like God's rules. So they deny he exists. There's no possible way to prove God doesn't exist. How could you prove such a thing? I asked one atheist, I said,
there are sincere atheists that just don't have any evidence, but they would love to believe in God if there is some evidence.
No, they do not want to believe in God. You can't possibly know there's no God. I asked one atheist, I said, do you know everything? He said, well, no. I said, do you know half of everything? No. Well, could God exist in the other half you don't know? You'd have to be everywhere at the same time to know God doesn't exist. You can't do that. You can believe there's no God. That's why atheism is a religion. Evolution is a religion. You have to believe that an amoeba can turn to a whale if you give it billions of years. You can't know that.
You can reverse that, please? Because we can say, do you know everything or even half of everything?
No, I don't claim to.
Yeah.
That's why I freely admit.
What if atheism is in that half?
I admit I believe God made the world by faith. I believe the Bible is true. They don't want to admit that that evolution is a religion because then they can't get tax funding to teach it. If we're going to teach their religion, why don't we teach all religions in school? I admit I believe by faith God made the world. They do not admit that they have a religion about how the world got here. They want to say it's science. There's nothing scientific about evolution. I've been trying for 35 years now to get atheists to show me where's the science for evolution. Here, right here. They're teaching the kids in school that an amoeba, get a picture, an amoeba slowly turned to humans. And you're related to a sunflower. They drew lines on paper. That's not evidence. I can draw lines on paper connecting anything. These family trees that they teach our kids are nothing but artwork. They're propaganda posters. They are not science. Nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog. Nobody's ever seen a cow produce a non-cow. So why do we have these charts with the dog and the cow connected with a line between them?
Sorry, evolutionists would say that that's not the idea of evolution. They don't expect some cow producing non-cow. Yeah.
Here's a chart from our public school textbook. Everything goes back to a protozoa, a single-celled creature. Did the protozoa somewhere along the line produce a non-protozoa? Because a fish is not a protozoa, but they have the fish coming from a protozoa. Now, it didn't do it in one step. It didn't do it in a trillion steps. It doesn't do it at all. That's my point. You can watch protozoa produce babies in the laboratory for the rest of your life. They will always be protozoa. You can watch dogs produce babies for the rest of your life. They will always be a dog. There are no exceptions. Now, if you wish to believe something else, that's fine. You believe what you want, but it's not science. No farmer in the world has ever seen a cow produce a non-cow or a dog produce a non-dog. It just doesn't happen. So why are we drawing a line saying the protozoa turned to a fish, amphibian, reptile, and finally humans? Yes, they do teach that a protozoa produced a non-protozoa somewhere along the line because a human is not a protozoa. So this is what they're teaching. That's my objection. Textbook says all forms of life on Earth today are descended from a common ancestor. That is not a scientific statement. That's a religious statement. They believe that. You have no scientific evidence for that at all. Our ancestor was a primitive unicellular organism. There is no such thing as a primitive unicellular organism. If it's alive, it's complicated. One single-celled creature is more complex than the internet of the world. Okay,
Mr. Hovind,
yes.
can we skip to another topic because evolution is not main for this interview. Can we talk about inorganic radiometric methods for dating, such as uranium, how you say, I don't know in English. So yeah.
Potassium, argon, yeah.
Yeah.
All dating methods, let's see right here. Whether it's carbon dating or potassium decays to argon. Okay, there are about 8 different radioactive elements that they use to try to date things. They're all using the same assumptions. How much was in it when it got buried? I don't know. Has it always decayed at the same rate? I don't know. Has there been any contamination? I don't know. It's just, they get wild numbers. I'll show you here. Potassium, argon dating, the problems of excessive argon. You can read the article for yourself on icr.org. They really date things by this stupid geologic column, which does not exist anywhere. And again,
can
I keep
read
asking.
one comment from study? Sorry, because one study show from Takahashi, 1986, he says that in fact it has been calculated that the beta decay rate of technetium, I don't know how in English to say.
Right, potassium.
What?
But potassium, potassium.
No, it's a different element. 99, it's Tc. So, yeah, beta decay rate can be decreased from 100,000 years to 1 year at a temperature 500 million Kelvin. So that's a big temperature, and we shouldn't expect that temperature. So probably it's constant decay. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't have to study that particular one, but any radioactive element that is decaying to something else, you have to start with the question, how did it get up there to begin with, to begin to decay? Because there's no examples of them getting higher numbers, forming, adding. So again, they're all decays, which ought to put up red flags with those who want billions of years. But so what if that one would take? She said 500 million years, 500 million degrees. I don't know. I've never seen that study. But the point is, the decay rate. You don't know the initial content. If suppose we had a room full of people and half the people left every 10 minutes. Half the people leave every 10 minutes. If we start with 100 people, 50 people are gone. We wait 10 more minutes, 25 more leave. We wait 10 more minutes, 12 and a half people leave. Can I walk into the room and see 12 people there and say, wow, it's been through 3 half-lives? No. They could have all left at one time. There might not have been 100 people to start with. You cannot possibly know these things that they're assuming with carbon dating or any of these dating methods. You don't know how much was in it when it started. We know there are things that affect the decay rate. She only checked for temperature. Does atmospheric pressure affect it? Does radiation from the sun affect it? I don't know. I'm not familiar with that element.
Right. If we want to change rate, we should put that element in the middle of star or supernova or anything that is almost impossible. So we shouldn't expect any change because it's not realistic to get that pressure or temperature. We have another study from Earth and Planetary Science Letters from 1999. Chinan Hu, that's author. So he or she said that element beryllium, I think it's Be, changed for 1.5% decay rate, and that's by special laboratory or anything. So if we can change for just a little by special instruments, so we don't expect to change in real life. What do you think?
Well, how do you know how much was in it when it started? How can you know what was in it 1 billion years ago? Who can know such a thing?
I think we can, because all elements except C14, that's organic, but inorganic matter, all elements have more than 450 million years decay rate. And that's interesting because if solar system is really old, as 4.5 billion years, then we should expect only to see those elements with that decay rate.
Well, now hold it. Some elements don't decay at all. They're steady. They've reached they're stable. They don't have a decay rate at all. So are they billions of years old, or were they formed yesterday? How could you know such a thing? Potassium, you can put iron meteorite with potassium in it in distilled water for 4.5 hours, and 80% of it's gone. There are too many factors that can affect the rate of decay. You do not know, cannot possibly know how much was in it when it formed. You can guess at that. That element you mentioned, 99, after studying that, there are only 92 naturally occurring elements. So this one is one of the artificially created ones, okay? There's 92 naturally occurring elements. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's 99, yeah. So how we get the same years for rocks with 4 or 5 different methods? That shouldn't be if that's the wrong method. What do you think?
Well, they don't all give the same number. They can test.
We have an example for that in Saskatchewan in Canada. So we have rubidium, strontium, potassium, argon, uranium, lead, decay pairs, all gave ages of 72.5 plus or minus 0.2 million years. Sorry.
Well, which numbers get published? The only ones that get published are those that match the geologic age. It all goes back to the geologic column. They found a skull. Richard Leakey found he believes in evolution. It looked like modern humans, but it dated 2.9 million years old. It was under the KBS tuff, the layer of rock it was found under. KBS tuff, named after K. Brensenmeyer, was dated using potassium argon at 212 to 230 million years old in Nature magazine. So they know this layer of ash, they say it's 200 million years old. Now they find a human skull under it. Does that mean humans were here 200 million years ago? No, they said that can't be right. Check it again. So they took 10 samples of the KBS tuff, dated it, and got 10 different answers. Which number would you like?
Is that right?
That's published in this book, Bones of Contention, a 500% error. They changed it from 212 million down to 500,000, just like that. If they had never found that skull, they never would have even checked it. They want things to be old. They used to say the Earth is 70,000 years old. 1905, get the old textbooks, I got them right here. They said the Earth is 2 billion years old. 1969, when they went to the moon, they said the Earth is 3.5 billion years old. Now they're saying 4.6. Earth is getting older at the rate of 220 years per year, or 21 million years per year. They just keep making up numbers. I'm sorry, it's not science. I love science. Evolution is not part of science. They get wild dates with every dating method. They might have to date a sample 10 times to get the number they want. Well, then why waste your money on dating it? Just pick the number you want. Dates that don't fit the theory are rejected. They're not published. The correct dates match the geologic column.
But they publish in articles, they publish even bad results. I saw personally that they publish if they had trillion years old rocks, but they don't hide that, right?
Well, a volcano erupted in Sicily in 122 BC. It was recorded in history. They know when the volcano erupted. They used potassium argon to date the lava that came out of there, and it's 250,000 years old. Wait, it's only 2,000. Why did potassium argon date give a 250,000 year? They took lava from a volcano that erupted in 1801. That's the best way to get potassium argon. It gave an age of 1.6 million. That's the Journal of Geophysical Research. It's not 1.6 million. I'm sorry, it's 200 years old.
Right, but they published it, right?
Right. This is a rare thing if it happened. Usually stuff like that doesn't get published.
But if they lie and hide the results, they wouldn't publish, right?
Well, which one's right? They watched it erupt 200 years ago and wrote it down. Why would it say 1.6 million? Doesn't this prove that the dating method is not reliable?
I asked a geologist, sorry for interrupting, just to add quick, I asked some geologists and they say that we have some tolerance. We cannot say with that method how old is that rock, because it gives a mistake about, let's say, a few 100,000 years. So we cannot use that for that.
Well, lava from 1959 eruption. Many people saw it erupt. They took samples of it, and it dated 8.5 million years old. See, they know it's wrong because they saw it happen. What if you date a sample that nobody saw? Well, then they're going to accept that number. Had nobody seen it, they would have said, yep, 8.5 million. No.
But in 1959, I asked some experts, and they say that in that time they used something else, and now they use zircon, and that's more precise, and now it gets a precise date. So
no, all of them have the same assumptions. How much was in it when it got buried? You don't know. Has the atmosphere always had the same amount? If it's something coming from airborne into the sample, like carbon-14, you can't know that. Has it decayed at the same rate? We know there are things that affect the decay rate. Air pressure, radiation from the sun. There are things that has it been contaminated? You can't know that. They watched the volcano in 1972 erupt. Potassium argon dated, 350,000 years old. Mount St. Helens, the lava flow, it happened in 1980. My sister lives right up near there. I went up there a few years after it happened. Mount St. Helens exploded. When they dated the lava from that, they dated the whole rock sample of 350,000. They dated it 5 different ways here and got 5 different numbers. Which one's right? None of them. If you date a sample of potassium argon, if you date a rock that you know how old it is, it doesn't work. If you date an unknown sample, you don't know how old it is, they assume that it works. This is not science. This is stupid, real stupid. Tell them I said so.
But Mr. Hovind, if we measure something in micrometers using a meter stick, let's say, and it's acceptable to miss by a millimeter or centimeter because it cannot measure with such precision. So also for mountains that you quote, that's okay. We expect a few millions or hundreds of thousand years. Yeah.
Okay. In 1999, they dated basalt from Mount Sicily in Italy. That would be 35 years old. It dated 700,000 years. That's not a micrometer off. That is orders of magnitude way off, okay? That'd be 20,000 times off. I'm sorry. It doesn't work. You may, I don't know what your motive is in all of this. You may want the earth to be billions of years old so that you can reject the Bible. Maybe that's your motive. I don't know.
No, I believe Bible. I believe in gap theory, but I just ask why we have results that are millions of years old for that mountain, but not billions. Why is that case?
They know they watched it erupt. They know the date. The dates. The point is, it doesn't work. And again, how much was in it? Has there been any contamination? How much was in it when it started? There's just no way to know those things. That's why I keep saying, in an honest court of law, none of the radioactive dates would hold up. There's a good book. Joseph, do we sell that one? The Evolution Handbook? It's excellent. It's about 900 pages, okay? There's more about radioactive dating on icr.org if you want to go there. So if you choose to believe that, you can believe whatever you want. Now, Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning. Matthew 19:4, Mark 10:6. Was Jesus lying or was he stupid?
No.
Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning.
But,
was he lying? If you think there's a gap, if you think there was a gap, then you think he was either lying or stupid. Which is it?
No, I agree that Jesus said that life was recent. He doesn't give date 6,000 years, but he doesn't address inorganic materials, so it's open.
Well, in the 10 Commandments, God wrote on a rock with his finger the 10 Commandments and gave it to Moses. He said, in 6 days, the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is. Exodus 20, Exodus 31. God said he made everything in 6 days. Do you believe that, or is God lying?
Right, but scholars would translate that like land, sky, and third, I forgot. That's not entire planet or matter. Yeah.
Oh, so when he said God made everything in 6 days, he didn't really mean that? We have to have
but
you to
where
tell us what it
find
means?
everything?
Yeah, define everything. Even Bill Clinton got to be related. What's the definition of is, The Bible says in Romans 5 and 1 Corinthians 15, nothing died until Adam sinned. Man brought death into the world. Do you believe things died before? Do you believe things died before man got here?
No.
So when did dinosaurs live?
Few thousand years ago. I don't know. I believe in a recent life as a creationist. So
Okay.
yeah.
So why do you want the Earth to be billions of years old? What good does that do? If no life is
I
here.
think there is a good argument from science, but also from the Bible, because we have in first two verses, God says that Merism created sky and land, so that's another name for everything, like universe. And then he says that Earth was void, and then he comes and creates in 6 days. So I don't see a contradiction between that. What do you think?
Okay. If you text Joseph your address, I'll get my booklet, The Gap Theory, where I go through all these arguments. Brother, it's been a full hour, and I got a lot of people waiting for me. Can we do another program later, take on gap theory?
Yes, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
I thought you wanted carbon dating today. Okay. Sounds good. So I believe it's true. I believe it's easy to understand. God made everything in 6 days. The world's 6,000 years old. Dinosaurs were big lizards that lived with Adam and Eve. So come visit America. Come see our theme park in Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama. Okay?
Okay, let me just give conclusion for my audience. That was our conversation with Kent Hovind. Whether you agree or disagree, we hope this discussion gave you something to think about. If you found it interesting, don't forget to subscribe and support the channel. Your help allows us to keep bringing high quality content on science and religion. See you in the next episode.
All right. Thank you, sir.